From Santa Monica on the Ross Gerber Show, Ross Gerber.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you to the live studio audience we have today, live from Santa Monica, California. I'm excited to bring you a new show, the Ross Gerber Show, which we'll be interviewing wonderful guests. And today we're going to be talking LA politics. We're looking to make LA clean and green, and we have two wonderful young fellows here that are running for city council, District 5 and District 11. And what we wanted to do was create a new format for people to get to know the people who are running for office, because quite frankly, most people really don't get good information from the traditional media. So we decided we should do a YouTube show, because the one thing that I'm so excited to do is to support young people to run for office. It's just so important, and I highly recommend you get engaged with your local politics, get engaged with your local politicians. That's how we get things done. But without supporting young people to run for office, we're going to be stuck with a bunch of 75 and 80-year-olds running our country. So first, I'd like to introduce Sam Yebri. He is running here in the Westwood District. He's a wonderful young fellow. Welcome, Sam. Come on in. Good to see you. And then next, we have another wonderful fella who is also from the Venice area, a fellow musician. What a wonderful, diverse background, a lawyer and musician. It's kind of like me, playing both sides of the brain, decided to torture himself with city politics. Mike Newhouse, welcome. Good to see you, Mike. Good to see you. Good to see you, Mike. Yeah, so we got two real big power players here today. I wanted to start off the show, with two just phenomenal guests, and so I thank you guys for making the time to be here. But most importantly, that you care so much about our city, because you're doing something that I'd love to do, but I personally, my wife would kill me if I did this, to be honest. But it takes a special person to dive into politics. When you have a successful career, you have family, you have other activities you do, and you're saying, I'm going to dive into LA city politics. So I do think it takes a special person. So that's why I'm putting this effort in to try to help you guys, is because I think it needs to be done, and I think the initiative is phenomenal. So let's get started. Sam, let's start with you. How did you tell your wife you're going to run for LA City Council? What did she say?
Yeah, it was natural. Both of us are immigrants. I came here when I was a year old as refugees from Iran. We lived the American dream. I went from public schools to Yale, started a successful business, raising 4 young kids. We've been active in the community, but the city that we love.
Did you grow up in LA?
I did.
Okay.
I've spent my entire life here ever since I was a 1-year-old kid, and the city that we love is just falling apart. And I think we had no choice to try to do something about it. And it's not going to get better by electing the same old folks over and over again.
Yeah, I agree. What about you, Mike? You have a speech for your wife? Explain, hey, I just decided to give up my lucrative legal career to run for a lower paying job in politics.
No. My wife, Ruthie, I think gave me the speech telling me that I needed to run for office.
That's the nice thing about living in Venice.
Right. We're obviously at the epicenter of a lot of what's wrong with CD11 right now, whether it's the homeless issue, whether it's crumbling infrastructure issues, whether it's public safety issues. We obviously live in the belly of the beast, so to speak. And Ross, as you know, I've been involved in community politics at the neighborhood council level, and then also as a commissioner on the city planning commission.
Right. So you did the Venice community council.
Yeah. So I've been volunteering my time for a long time, but it gets to a point where I think a person, you've grown a successful business. You have raised children who are doing well and getting a little bit older, and you really feel that call to public service. And, I know Sam shares the same feeling that I do, but I'm not running for office because it's a goal or there are further offices. I'm running because I really honestly think that right now we need folks like Sam and myself who are moderate folks, who are progressive but moderate, and can bring people together and can listen to people with extreme views on each side and try and bring them together for common sense solutions for our respective districts. And that's what we need right now. We don't need folks out there that are wedded to an ideology.
Right. And I think this point is super important. I think the studio audience likes this point, right? Yeah, I mean, they really like it. And I think it's because most of us are now inundated with either super left progressive politics or super right conservative politics. And actually, most people don't fall into those categories. And politicians, for some reason, have felt that they need to cater to the fringes because they have so much influence on social media. But what they don't understand is that's just social media.
Right.
That's not real life. And I say this all the time. Twitter isn't real life. Sometimes I have to remind myself of it because I'm on this Twitter and, you know, I'm actively involved with it. But what you're seeing in Twitter and what people are yelling at you about or whatever is not real life at all. And I think that's one of the mistakes that's been happening in politics, where people are catering to Twitter more than they're catering to the actual constituents in your district. And so I think that moderate viewpoint is going to be very successful over the next election cycle, not just in local politics, but in the Senate and in the House as we get to the elections in November.
And there's real consequences. This is a local job, so it's not partisan, right? Making sure that people who are suffering in the streets get housing or services, not a Democrat versus Republican issue. Making sure our roads are safe and our neighborhoods are clean and vibrant. These aren't partisan issues. So it's just people who, like Mike was saying, have solutions and are ready to work really hard and drown out the folks who have an agenda.
I think that point is incredibly valid. These are not partisan politics, getting people off the streets.
And I think that's why we're running for these jobs in this moment, is because it's not Washington. It's not a debate society. This is about the most important issues facing every. This is the future of our city. And every family.
Well, I'll give you an example. Newsom was complaining today because Disney said they're moving more workers to Florida from LA. And I'm like, what the heck do you expect, Gavin? You've got a huge surplus and you haven't done anything for people, for families with costs of living going up, which we all, can accept. But Gavin's got the tools right now to make life a little bit easier for people in California, like cutting taxes just across the board, or cutting the gas tax, which would help a lot of lower income people. And he just like, oh, why are you moving your company? And it's like, you've made our state, not only is it super expensive to live, but it's also hard to live in our state in a lot of reasons. And we're going to talk about some of these issues today: homelessness, over construction, traffic, quality of life, affordability of housing. These are major issues for our city. Now, one of the reasons we have these issues, in my mind, is because it's such a great city. If nobody wanted to live here, it's like, no problem, right? So let's dive into the first one. The first one falls under what I call clean LA. Clean LA is, how do we clean up our city? And then the two areas I think people are most concerned about is public safety, because that's gotten bad recently. And there's been a spate of robberies even around here recently, local business owners, smash and grab, and then lots of sort of petty thefts going on, and then some serious ones. And then secondly, you've got the clean LA dealing with the homeless problem. And now that problem has, some of the solutions are being implemented now. It's been a dramatic difference in the short term, like the tiny homes, which I think have been a huge success at the VA facility, for example. And so let's talk about clean LA. What are some of your thoughts? Let's start with you, Mike. What are some of your thoughts? So obviously, how do we solve the homeless problem is like a 5-hour debate. But to sum it up, how do you view solving this problem?
Well, I think what we have to do is act quickly. What is often the enemy here of, the good is the perfect. And you have too many folks that are offering 9-month plan, 1-year plan, 2-month study period, and we don't need it. Ross, what we got to do is we got to go out and do what other successful cities have done with homelessness, and what we've been successful doing, for instance, last summer down on the boardwalk in Venice, when that encampment was cleared. We need to give 30-day notices to all encampments across CD11 and ideally across the city. And that's something that I think Sam and I share the idea of, we need to do something citywide, not just in our district.
They just move.
But at a minimum, and what I can control, on January 9th, we'll give 30-day notices to encampments across the district and let them know that in 30 days, we're going to have to clear this, and we're going to enforce 4118. For the good of people dying at 5 people a day on the streets, and for the good of communities that have been ripped apart by
I want to stop you for a second here, because I think a lot of people have this misconception that enforcement is somehow harsh or bad for those people.
No.
But what they're not understanding is how many people are dying every day in these encampments. And sometimes it's like tough love.
Well, and to be specific about it, look, when those 200 folks were cleared off of the boardwalk and all put into shelter, there was not a single arrest.
And by the way, that Venice shelter is a pretty good shelter. They've been running this thing really smoothly.
And the bottom line at the end of the day is that, again, we're not talking about arrests. We're talking about getting people into shelter. And what I'm talking about is an important part of this is we have licensed clinical social workers in this city that we can pay a negotiated insurance rate, and each clinical licensed social worker can supervise 6 graduate students underneath them that can work at an even lower negotiated rate because they're getting their hours. That's a 6 times force multiplier on licensed clinical social workers that can not only go out to encampments on a daily basis for those 30 days, doing nothing short of getting relationships made, getting trust made, and getting people into shelter, but can continue that care throughout to keep folks off the streets. And
because
that's what we need to do.
Mental health care is really the root of the solution.
The root of it.
I mean, don't you agree that this is sort of the root?
So I talk, when asked what's the biggest crisis facing Los Angeles, I don't even talk about crime or homelessness. I say untreated mental illness in our city, right?
Yeah. Because it's also opioids, suicides.
They're all related, and our social safety net as a city and as a society has fallen apart, right? When the leading cause of homelessness among women is domestic violence, and where can they go is onto the streets, and the leading cause of homelessness among people under 30 is that they aged out or fell out of the foster care system, and where do they go? Onto the streets. And when someone gets them, has a mental health breakdown, the only places for them to go is a jail bed or an ER bed. Our system is broken.
Well, and it's like the police have to intervene, and then you also have more shootings and all these other things because they're dealing with mental health crises or domestic violence, and they're not equipped to deal with it. I don't think it's fair to ask police officers to deal with mental health crises. Quite frankly, they're not even trained for that,
It's not fair, and it's not efficient, right? We don't have enough police officers as it is. I'll tell you, I had a great opportunity last week to meet with LAPD Chief Moore, and it was a sort of I was going by his office. We were going to meet for probably 15 minutes and ended up turning into a 45-minute conversation, which was really, really great. And he pointed out a couple of good corollaries to this issue that I had never thought about. And this is the police chief saying this. And he said, yes, all the ideas you have, Mike, are good and they're spot on. But he goes, there's one other thing that has to happen. We need to at least triple the city sanitation budget, because part of what we're dealing with is the first responders are my officers who are spread too thin anyway. And then they come out to deal with an issue and they've got 7 couches that have been dumped, 7 mattresses that have been dumped. There's trash everywhere, and there's nothing they can do about that. And they said, if we want, it's almost a new version of broken windows. With us in the city, it's trash everywhere. It creates a feeling of dis-ease. It creates a feeling that we're unsafe.
Downtown, all over
you see it everywhere. I mean, I see it in Venice. I see it in West LA.
Pico the other day.
So we need to also make sure that we're keeping our city clean. Literally, it's the basics, right? You don't keep your city clean, it's really tough to keep it safe.
Well, it's funny because I was just in New York a few months ago, and that was like my takeaway. I was like, bags of trash everywhere, all piled up. And I go, don't the sanitation people come in New York? And they're like, well, when they feel like it, And I was like, well, boy, New York would look a lot better if somebody grabbed all these bags, because they're all sitting here waiting to be picked up. Sanitation is a huge part of the visual of your city, and also the sort of heart of your city. If it's dirty and all that, and it's how people treat it.
And it's connected to other issues, right? We have massive high fire prone areas, and there's trash. That's an issue there too. Small businesses are suffering because
you have homeless people hurting the businesses because, like in a lot of cases, they're camped out in front or just being near them. Apartment, like the place on Pico down the street, brand new apartment buildings, beautiful investment across the street from an encampment. People don't want to rent it. It's like some guy put in $50 million, and and it's a nice housing in an important area. So I think one of the other things that I think is a misperception about the homeless problem is there is places to put these people, and we've talked about the site by LAX, and so there are many alternatives that we can actually implement. I think your point, Mike, is the most is we just have to do it today. We don't need a 12-month plan. We need a one-day plan. Let's start today.
So we can do both, right? There's the urgency of getting people out of encampments and helping people who are suffering in our parks or outside of our schools, right? Because our primary job as leaders is to alleviate suffering and save lives. And as Mike said, 5 people a day are dying on the streets of Los Angeles. So we can do that. And like Desmond Tutu quote, we're spending a lot of time pulling people out of the river, but let's find out why they're falling in.
Right.
We got to help people
Well,
on the mental health and the eviction
I think
and
we
on
need
that
to
side
make
too.
a big commitment to like a mental health, department or program that, we're really empowering this solution through budgeting. Like actually putting money into it.
So I
versus
talked to,
saying somebody else's budget has to take it.
yeah. So I had the chance to talk about this a couple of nights ago. We had the Brentwood Homeowners Association debate over at the University Synagogue. And I use that as an opportunity to talk about the fact that I firmly believe and will offer resolutions on day one to create a city department of health.
Yeah, mental health, right.
But not even just mental health,
just
a
health.
city department of health, because the problem is, I think it was 1964 when the county essentially became the health department, including the mental health department for all of Los Angeles County, including LA City.
Right.
The problem is
so
now
the county's actually in charge of mental health.
Right.
It's all we have. We
Right.
don't have a city
So
department
10 million person county is supposed to be
With 5 supervisors in
Right.
charge. that no one can
Exactly.
Right.
So we
and nobody
need
can name them. Isn't that crazy?
name. Think about a $40 billion budget, the budget
It's
they have.
crazy.
Think about having a $40 billion company
Well,
and no one knows who's in charge.
See,
right?
people don't even really understand how LA works.
Right, yeah.
Because everyone's like, oh, the mayor. And I go, oh, the mayor actually has no power.
Very
That's why
little.
you guys are here, because city council actually has power in LA. And then there are these board of supervisors, which to me are sort of like the, like the people in Star Wars that are in charge. Like, you don't know who they are. They're a weird face that makes a weird voice.
They were
It's like,
traditionally
who are
called the
these
Five Kings for a reason.
Oh,
It's
is that
now
what they
it's
were-
now Five Kings and Queens, obviously, but
Yeah. So the county has this sort of like these rights and powers that sort of are great in theory, but bad in practice because it's such a big county.
Right.
So how do you serve 10 million people?
Right.
Right.
So
And it's just like the COVID stuff.
right.
There's no COVID in West LA compared to other areas of LA, but when you're looking at the whole county,
Right.
like we're all having to follow rules from.
in of the 88 cities in LA County, the 2 that did the best on COVID response, homelessness, mental health are the 2 that have their own health departments, Pasadena and Long Beach.
Right.
City of Los
That's a great
Angeles.
point.
Yeah.
And people
Great
trust
point.
local government. The responses are socialized, so specialized and localized. And I think what
You see that
we-
here in Santa Monica. I went down to the courthouse the other day.
Yeah.
Now that they're not seeing cases, it's actually quite efficient, right?
Right.
They see the cases on Zoom. So when you go to the courthouse, actually stuff gets done. There was no line at the clerk. I was
Yeah.
like, this is insane. But when you see a small city like Santa Monica, how the potential efficiency
Right.
of that, and actually Santa Monica is pretty nice. Like they've cleaned up Santa Monica
Yeah.
pretty nice. And then you cross over
Yeah.
into LA City. I don't know, was it Rose or something, whatever the border is. And it's like, oh, I'm in LA City. I know I'm in LA City because it's dirty.
So the theme that I hear often knocking on doors in the 5th District is, what about the neighboring cities, right? Santa Monica, West Hollywood, Culver
Right.
City, Beverly Hills. Once you go north of Whitworth, you walk into Beverly Hills, or you go
Right.
into
Right.
past
It's like,
Robertson
you're
and you
in
go to West
Beverly
Hollywood.
Hills.
Or same thing, right? You get in Culver City, the streets are paved, the trees are green,
Right.
you have emergency response, the parks have rangers, the
Mhm.
libraries have security. We've defunded our library security. We've defunded our
Uh-huh.
park ranger
Right.
system. We're not getting the world-class services befitting
Right.
world-class city anymore.
Yeah, I think that's accurate.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to green. So we talked about clean. Obviously, I think the solutions are obvious. It's the wherewithal to do it,
Right.
and then obviously having the right idea. Secondly, I think some of the people in charge now had incentives to use solutions that aren't effective. And so helping developers build $800,000 units for homeless people is crazy in my mind, when you could build 10 tiny homes for the same price. So you can take care of 10 people for what Bonnin wants to do for one. And that's why it hasn't succeeded, because it takes forever.
Or even 80. Some of these things you can get cost points down at $5, $10, $20,000 per
Yeah.
tiny home.
Yeah.
Think about that, right?
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like, you can make a huge difference with $500,000 versus you
Absolutely.
wouldn't even build one unit in the current situation. And we've seen that. We've seen it work. Like I was there yesterday at the VA, just like, wow, and there was room there too, by the way.
Yeah.
Like they definitely could have more people there.
Sure.
So I'm like, there's no reason why somebody's sleeping on the street tonight.
And you know why that happened, right? I mean, this is CD11, but
Right.
it took
Right.
the murder of 2
Right. It was two
homeless
people.
veterans
Right.
by other veterans on the eve of Veterans Day for Secretary McDonough of the VA to come and say, city, county, you failed, you've abdicated responsibility. The federal government's going to come over and house 100
Yeah, but they
people.
could have
within-
done that long before too.
But that was the point, right?
Yeah.
everyone in charge was
Yeah,
embarrassed.
people had to die.
Right. It took that
Yeah, it took
happening. It was
people
almost like
dying.
clearing the boardwalk.
Well, then
It
remember
took-
there was that car accident too, where the car rammed into a homeless
Yeah.
person and killed him
Yeah.
too on the same stretch. And
Yeah.
it was like, and that's what I was saying to Bonin too. I was like, how many veterans are we going to let die sleeping outside the gate
Right.
of $1 billion plus veterans facility?
Right.
The land at the VA is the most valuable land in Los Angeles.
400 acres,
It's
4
insane.
Disneylands, 4
Okay?
Disneylands.
And each acre, so a 10,000 foot lot where you get 4 on an acre, right? Okay, 5 million.
Right.
Okay, so each acre is $20 million. So it's an $8 billion piece of land that they sit on a bunch of old buildings. Nobody's on it.
I never really thought about it that way.
That's
It's a good- it's a fair
crazy.
point.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Sell a little corner to some crazy developer, and it's like you could feed homeless people for 10 years.
But the point is, it's not a resource issue. We have the money. We
That's
spent
right. That's
the
what
city
I'm
and the
saying.
county
That's
spent
right.
$2 billion a year
Right.
every year for the last 5 years. And what have we gotten? A spike of 50%.
Right.
Yeah,
in the same period of time.
absolutely. So
And
the money's being spent,
and
and it gets
6,000
worse.
and
Right.
6,000
Yeah.
people who are experiencing homelessness
Right.
are now dead in the
Right.
last 5 years.
Right.
So it's not working.
And we're not even talking the strain on the hospital system from overdoses and sickness and,
Right.
and diabetes and the healthcare system.
I'll give you another example. I met with a series of police chiefs this week to understand the fire department, how it works. And half of the calls that they get
Yeah,
have to do with homelessness.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of course.
Right?
Absolutely.
Either health, because EMS is 80% of LA fire
Yeah.
department's calls, or an encampment fire, right? We know the
Right,
Palisades
right.
fire.
No,
right?
when I
That
lived
caused-
in Venice, I
That's-
called a
think
few
about-
times because sometimes I thought somebody was dead on the street.
Right.
And I'd
Right.
be like, you got to call because
Right.
I'm not qualified to determine if this
Well,
person's
well, and
alive.
that's why, I mean, like Sam's saying, the problem is the focus. I mean, you spend $2 billion. The problem is that it's called housing first, but really the policy has more
It's
been like,
developers first.
well, it's been housing only
Right,
is,
right.
is the problem.
Right.
And we have to do both. We need to create permanent supportive housing, more affordable housing. Of course, we need to create housing at all levels in Los Angeles.
Right.
We don't have enough middle income housing.
That's right.
We don't have enough upper class housing. We don't have enough housing. But having said all that, at the end of the day, we have to also focus a ton of resources on getting people off the streets tomorrow,
Right.
or else it's just going to continue to get worse.
Yeah.
Like Sam said, $2 billion. And what do we have? A 50% spike in homeless folks. It's because we're only focusing on long-term housing, which can never catch up to the increasing demand
Exactly.
of unhoused populations.
Our leaders need to acknowledge that we can't build our way out of homelessness.
Right.
We
Right.
can't arrest our way out of
Right.
homelessness.
Nope.
Right? There are a lot of causes and there are a lot of aspects
But
to
meanwhile,
it.
we have the highest demand for labor in probably my lifetime. I've
Right.
never seen so many companies in LA
Right.
desperate for labor right now.
Yeah.
Even my family desperate to find people to hire to, nanny, and it's like we're calling like the agencies and they're like, nah, everybody's busy, and I'm like, boy, there's no reason why somebody can't find a job today at every income level. So let's talk about Green LA. This is something that's really important to me in my heart.
Yeah.
I love the beach. I grew up here in LA. I love nature. I think one of the beauties of our city is that people come here from all around the world because of the weather and because we have the most beautiful beaches and people too, for that matter, but also the attractions and everything. But when you see the pollution, when I was growing up, and I'm a little bit older, maybe Mike and I are the same age. I'm probably older than you.
We're a little older than Sam.
Yeah, that's okay. Sam still doesn't have that much gray hair.
A little bit.
He will in 4 years.
At least Sam has hair. At least he has hair, right?
That's true. No, but I've been thinking about things like the pollution problem.
Yeah.
And during COVID, one of the most amazing things was people didn't drive in LA for those couple months. And I had never seen the city that's clean. The
Yeah.
air, the water, I thought it was a joke. Like the dolphins were jumping out of the ocean. And I'm like, this is amazing.
Right.
The birds are chirping. And you realize that there's so much pollution in the city. So there's pollution from traffic and cars. There's pollution from noise,
Right.
which is a nightmare with construction and all this kind of stuff. There's so much we can do to encourage a cleaner lifestyle. Like, for example, LA finally has this new rule on composting. Okay.
Right.
And we're still trying to figure out how to implement this rule, right?
Yeah.
Because we need another trash can, right?
Right.
And it's like, but yet this is a big thing for the environment. Now, my wife was like ready to throw a party when this thing passed.
Right.
Because she wants, but but it's true. Like composting actually is pretty good for the environment. Like
Absolutely.
Why aren't we doing this? We both drive Teslas. I'm a big supporter of EVs. Obviously, there's a lack of EV supply, so you can't say everybody should have an EV because only so many people can afford it, and they're just supply constraints, which is a great problem. But we also need a city that really encourages people to do that by making the cost of owning an EV less and making it easier to charge and such, as well as incentivizing gas stations to shut down and become charging stations, things like that. But I think one of the biggest complaints I get about EVs is so many people live in apartments in LA, and then the apartment landlords don't want to spend 5 cents of their rent money to put in plugs or chargers in the downstairs, in the garages. And so I think we need an incentive program for EVs for landlords. Like if you put in EV charging, you get a rebate for taxes or something like that.
Absolutely.
The second thing that I think is super effective is actually Tesla supercharger stations. There are none in the city of LA. Now, I don't know how that's possible. There are more Teslas in the city of LA than probably any city in America. Okay, maybe San Francisco, but I think LA has more. I can ask Elon, but I think there are more Teslas in southern, like LA, let's say county, than any other county in the world.
It certainly looks that way.
Yeah,
I mean,
but we don't have a Tesla supercharger. That's politics to me. That's not.
And you and
design.
I were talking about this, I think, at lunch the other day. But it is not only low hanging fruit. I think that the city and the state should not only give a tax rebate to a landlord who puts charging stations in their buildings, but quite frankly, if we need to for the next few years, we should completely subsidize it, to be honest with you. Because look, landlords have been hit extremely hard by COVID. Tenants have been hit extremely hard by COVID. Almost everybody has been hit extremely hard by COVID. But to add any operating cost to landlords right now is going to doom it to failure.
Well, granted, they're all raising rents right now pretty aggressively too.
That's fine. But the point is that why not err on the side of making sure that landlords have no excuse to not put them in, as opposed to making it yet another expense to a landlord who's feeling crunched. Number two, as we talked about, is the beauty about existing gas stations is that they have parking. Every gas station has 6 or 7 stalls. Every single one of those parking stalls should have a quick charger in them, so that where you normally are used to going to get your gas, you can go to get a charge.
Well, think about if you're a gas station owner. Okay. You don't make money on gas, actually. You make money at the convenience store.
Exactly.
Okay. So why wouldn't a gas station put 6 chargers in those 6 spaces? Because people park and they have to charge for 15 minutes. And so they're going to go into the convenience store and shop. And every single mall that puts a supercharger station near them is packed. Because the Tesla people come and they all shop. And the Tesla people typically spend a little bit more money than the average because it's a little bit higher income customer. And it's just economically smart to have a supercharger station near you. Okay.
So it's not just economically important, it's environmentally imperative, right? That we accelerate this permanent transition to electrification. Los Angeles should be the world leader in solar storage.
We should be showing everybody
distribution and charging. The fact that the 5th Council District and 11th Council District too, that great parts of Los Angeles and some of the biggest job centers are here, UCLA and Cedars, now Google coming to the Westside, the Westside Pavilion, Century City. Fox,
so let's talk about solar for a minute, because they're trying to take some of these incentives away.
But on the superchargers, I'm committed to finding ways to make sure that we have Tesla superchargers, but in general, we become a world leader on both solar and charging.
Yeah, so going back to the superchargers too, what the city has to do is say to Tesla, we want to add supercharger stations, and here are the potential locations. And they have a team that'll come out tomorrow and start working on it. I doubt that Elon gets up in the morning and says, we don't need superchargers in LA.
And you know what the game, the game changer is right now in Los Angeles? You know what's going to change everything? The future of Los Angeles? The Purple Line. 7 subway stations are coming to the mid-city and west side of Los Angeles from La Brea and Fairfax, Los Angeles, Rodeo, Century City, Westwood Village, and the VA.
It's just like right down Wilshire.
Goes right through Century City.
So that's going to be kind of a game changer. Are they going to finish that like while we're still alive?
Well, the money's there.
Like you said,
Well, the goal is to get done by the Olympics by 2028.
His life or my life? Oh, right.
The
The Olympics are coming too.
It'll be done by 2028.
Exactly.
Nothing like Olympics to speed stuff up.
That's right.
So,
and you get federal.
So it'll get built. But what about the infrastructure that we need? The first and last mile, the bike lanes, How do we create the housing nearby, the pedestrian corridors, the charging stations, the solar aspects of it? I mean, there's a lot of planning, and not all of that is getting done. I'm confident it'll get built.
Well, one of the things we're invested in is this company called Arcimoto, which makes these smaller vehicles, which I think the city should be buying for doing tasks and whatever. They're just small, cheap electric vehicles, and people can buy them too. And when you think about a city like LA, where many people now work from home, or their commutes are substantially less because of just the way our society's changed, these micro mobility options, they could be anywhere from bird scooters. You're seeing a ton of electric bikes now. So, you know, Santa Monica has no problem putting in bikes, that's for sure. Maybe too many. And then you've got these micro mobility options like Arcimoto, and then you've got your EV options. Yeah. So having a range of price points and options, as well as public transportation, completely changes the game and maybe deals with the traffic problem to some degree. Because it really is hard to get around LA now. You know, if somebody invites me to go out in West Hollywood on a Thursday night, it's like, I'm like, sorry.
Well, you know what I
can't get there. It's just not going to happen.
You know what I think can make a really big dent in this issue, both whether we're talking about traffic and cutting down vehicular trips and also creating more housing, is, you know, we have got a lot of office buildings, a lot of office space, especially in the corridors, Wilshire Corridor, Century City, Westwood, et cetera, that will probably not be fully occupied by offices anytime soon, if ever again.
Right.
And what we need to do is we need to incentivize turning those buildings into mixed use between office, ultra low income affordable housing, moderate priced housing. At the top, we can put in penthouses to make it, you know, obviously attractive for somebody to build and design. But what we get out of that also is we already have an infrastructure, right? Most of these buildings have been made LEED certified over the last 10 years. That's already done. On top of it, on the ground level in most of these areas, you have all the shopping you need, all the entertainment you need. You don't have to get in your car. And these buildings were built with enough parking for office spaces, which is 5 times as much parking as you need residentially. So on top of that, that can become public parking, so people aren't driving around the block for a ton of time, increasing congestion. Isn't that a zoning
issue? Like you have to rezone the building from commercial to...
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. In Koreatown, I was just with a client in Koreatown last week, and the building, he has been a client of mine who's been in a building on Wilshire for 20 years, and there was a big sign draped on the building saying, you know, rent here, live here. I said, Alan, you know, have they already converted this? He said, oh yeah. He said, half of the building is now residences.
Right.
My office is still there, but people are living here.
See, this is like the Google project, where we had this hulking mall that was doing nothing.
Yeah.
And Google's like, we'll turn them all into an office. And I was like, this is probably a dumb idea, but now I go by there and I'm like, wow, they did a nice job with this. If they ever go back to the office in Google, which I think they are, what a great location.
Right.
So that's the other thing about these buildings.
Yep.
You're kind of in a good location.
It's like a default transit oriented corridor with having to actually develop those, which in many neighborhoods become very divisive and some folks don't want them. If we had people living where offices already are and ground floor retail already is, we're killing 2 massive birds with 1 stone. We're cutting down vehicular trips, 3 really. We're cutting down emissions. And number 3, we're creating housing.
You know, it's funny because this building is about 75% empty most of the time. And we've been here the whole pandemic, mostly lonely. And now, in my mind, I just don't get why people haven't come back to work. You know, it's like, what will it take for you to come back to the office? But I think partially, you know, like we were looking at taking more space and we were debating it. And I was like, you know, there's a plus and a minus to this. It's like, why do we want to pay more rent? People are mostly working from home anyways. And I think about if I'm the owner of this building, which actually are my clients, I've got all this space. Like I could put apartments down. I could put retail down there. Like, so to me, I think part of it is zoning. Part of it probably isn't, but it's also people figuring this out. Like, hey, I could do this, you know.
But it takes the city to lead on it and make it easy and cost effective.
But we need housing, right? We need housing.
So there is an adaptive reuse ordinance or scheme in place. It's just very slow in Los Angeles. There's been some success downtown. Koreatown is now making progress there, but other cities, Culver City does it really fast and effectively. And I'm glad you mentioned Google. This is where Mike and I are going to fight each other, because I want to steal all the tech business from Venice, because it's become so difficult to live and operate and run a business there, and bring it to this Google corridor, right? Rancho Park, Westwood, where there's an expo line on the south end. On the north end, you have the purple line in UCLA. 100,000 cars go through Westwood to get to UCLA.
I heard they sold the Apple Pan. Is that true?
There's some new.
God, I hope not.
It's new owners, I heard.
Oh, new owners.
No,
but still
Apple
the
Pan is
Pan?
there. It's
Okay.
a beloved
That is an
institution.
historic place.
It is.
So I just want to make it clear.
Hands off Apple
if you
Pan.
want, if you want to see me angry, if you want to see me upset, if something happens to that Apple Pan, it's like what they killed that deli. What was it, Jerry's Deli or what? No, what was the deli on Junior's?
Junior's is
Junior's Deli.
going
They killed
Westwood.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like an institution.
Yeah.
I was like, isn't that a landmark? What does it take to be a landmark in LA? I mean, if you're around for 10 years, it's like a rare.
Well, look, I hope our biggest problem is you and I fighting over what businesses we're attracting
Right,
to our
there we
respective districts.
That's
That's
the
a
mindset
problem
we're gonna
I
bring.
want.
Well,
Yeah, that's what we are going to bring.
Like,
Exactly.
when I think about Venice in your district,
Yeah.
what I want to see you do is that is the entertainment lifeblood of the West Side. Okay, we got Venice West, we got Winston House, we got Ale House, Venice Ale House. We got all these great places. Scopa, you got waterfront redone. If live music needs a place to live.
Yeah.
And I know you play.
Yeah.
And I play.
Yeah.
And this is one of my big quests in life is to keep live music live. Not DJs. DJs are doing fine.
Yeah.
Live performances.
Yeah.
And one of the problems we're constantly having is somebody moves to Venice and they live across the street from a bar and they complain about noise. And I'm like, dude, you live in Venice across the street from a bar.
I mean,
like, it should have a sign when you sign the lease or whatever that you understand you live in an entertainment district.
Yeah.
Okay. But like, we need to support the vibrancy of the community in Venice because it's amazing. The artists and the creativity down there in your district. In the way I look at it is it's this wonderful business area that has been neglected.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you can really build up the Westwood area into this really cool, almost like alternative century city.
Yeah. A great model, a great case study is Westwood Village. We all think of this great part of town. There's a 42% commercial vacancy rate.
Yeah,
now.
it's
2 out of 5 stores.
It's
are
sad.
unbelievable. And there's no.
We want to bring Maloney's back. You know, it's like, I was talking to my friend. I was like, it's like we need Maloney's back. Like, it's a college town. It doesn't feel like a college town.
Well, I remember, I went to USC and I remember.
We forgive you.
Yeah, right, exactly. But, when I was in college at SC, we'd go to Westwood because it was so great. Right. It was so vibrant. We always wished that we had a Westwood Village type situation down by USC. And now it's actually flipped. Down by USC, you actually have more going on. Yeah. There's actually more to do than there is in Westwood these days, which is just completely sad. We got to get Westwood going again. I agree.
Sad. It's sad. I've
got to get it going again.
I loved Westwood. So the high point of Westwood was when I was a kid. I was like 12 and 13, and we would go there, and people would be cruising the streets, and it was packed everywhere, you know?
So I got to defend Westwood because I'm a Westwood guy.
Listen, I'm
a lifer in Westwood. So let me tell you, it is up on the upswing. We got the best brands in LA have just come in. Alfred Coffee, Creation, Sweet Green, Tender Green, Blue Bottles come in.
Well, you also have a very vibrant Persian community there with probably some of the best food in LA.
Exactly. So we have the best Persian food and just down this Westwood corridor, and with the subway coming, there's going to be a lot of investment. And the neighborhoods and the institutions are fighting for Westwood. For example, the Crest Theater, classic movie theater on Westwood Boulevard, was about to be sold to a developer, and the neighborhood came in, fought it, and partnered with UCLA and with the big philanthropist family, the Nimoy Bay family, and it's going to be performing arts.
Oh, that's great.
So it's now going to be called the Nimoy Theater, and it's under construction right now, and it's just south of Westwood, right? So that's going to bring life to that part of Westwood. And what's coming down on the south end with Google, I mean, it's going to be. I'm going to make it like Abbot Kinney. Well, I'm going to make Westwood Boulevard the best boulevard in LA.
But remember, that's a great idea. But remember when the theaters in Westwood, like the premieres would be there, and you'd rent out all the space.
Bruin, the Village.
And that corner was like, if you were in the movie business and you had a movie coming out, you wanted it, like you'd go to Westwood for your premiere. And it's like, it had that's almost like a glamour to it, and it's sort of like not there anymore. And it's like, it can totally be revitalized. So that's your question. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited
because I grew up here and I love that area.
And I'll tell you, Ross, one just last point on this. You were bringing up Venice and the Winston House, and I was with Jake Matthews. Last night we had dinner together.
By the way, I love that place, and I love the investment they've made into the community.
It's amazing. But yesterday the city's tourism plan came out. Right, big announcement, 99-page document. Nothing about Venice. It's like, what are we thinking about here?
All the tourists are already in Venice.
It's the largest tourist attraction in Los Angeles, and it's not a central part of the tourism plan for Los Angeles. That's just wrong-headed.
How does that happen? Is it just like the people get together and they forget that everybody comes to Venice and Santa Monica?
I don't know.
They've never been there on a Sunday? I mean,
A lot of it is leadership. Look, it's how are you going to spend your time as a council person?
That's
Sam
right.
just made a great point
That's right.
saying he's going to spend his time revitalizing Westwood. He's going to spend his time turning it into as an attractive as a destination as Abbott Kinney. Exactly. What am I going to spend my time doing? I'm going to spend my time promoting the West Side. I'm going to spend my time promoting Venice Beach. I'm going to spend my time making LAX a world-class airport to land in and to be able to transport
construction
from.
sometime. Oh, we got to solve that.
Gotta fix that.
We have got to solve that.
Can you imagine your whole life saying, I'm going to go to LA, just like we all say, you got to make that trip to Paris, to London, to, all these wonderful cities.
Right.
People in Europe and other places say, we're going to go to Los Angeles. You land in our airport, you walk out and
it's mayhem.
I'm sorry, wait, I have to get on this green shuttle. I got to wait for that.
By the way,
then I have to take it to
4 bags.
And I don't have an
It's
Uber.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
Right.
I got to get an Uber app or maybe I take a cab.
Unless you have money and you pay $150 for Uber to come pick you up, they will come to the terminal. So only the super wealthy can leave the terminal.
Right.
Everybody else who can't afford $150 Uber has to go through hell.
What a terrible introduction to Los Angeles.
I know.
Right?
I know.
We got to
That's
fix
how it
that.
happens when you land in Hawaii. Get on a wiki bus. They give you a thing.
They give you LA and you're in.
LA. I'm
to
like,
go.
I'm not leaving. Get to LA. You got a picture. Like, who knows who? I don't even know who. Where did our mayor go? Is he in India? It's like, I don't know. Does our mayor do anything? Crazy. Anyways, they're rebuilding LAX, and the new areas look amazing. And the rest, and it's like a 52-year plan. I think it's supposed to finish soon.
Yeah.
So we're getting there with the airport looking good, but whoever came up with this transportation solution must have been crazy.
I mean, we got to finish the green line, obviously. I mean, that's
but still, I mean, like, I kind of felt like cabs should still be able to be there. Like they're the ones who seem to be most screwed by Uber, and like if you want to take an Uber, fine, you have to go, but just jump in a cab right here. Kind of thing. I don't know. Maybe, I don't know why I feel for cab drivers, but I do. Well, it's a hard
traditional.
It's
I mean, look, I grew up, taking cabs in New York City, and I mean, sure, of course.
For a lot of immigrants, that was their job.
That's right.
That's how they
right. That's I guess
paid
that's
the bills,
why
right?
I do.
I'm sympathetic too.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So as much as I love Uber and the convenience, I don't think a whole class of employees should just be wiped out because their companies suck. Right. Which the cab companies still suck. But that being said, I don't know how they got kicked out of their spots. That was Uber money probably. Right. So we're going to deal with solar incentives. I think that is best dealt with in the construction process. So when you build a house now, there should be an incentive for builders to put solar on.
Oh yeah.
It just should be. I think the law is you're going to have to in California after a certain point. But I think that's something that could start right away.
And we have to ease for everyone else wherever they do live, right? We have to ease the process and make it faster and easier to go solar. Right?
Yeah.
And right now
dealing with the utilities.
And it's other cities do it. It's going to be a theme here, right? Santa Monica and Culver City, a lot easier to deal with than Los Angeles.
Well, we have the Department of Water and Power, and they are a city agency, so we should have some power over them. But for some reason, they're the most powerful people in the city.
Yeah. Well,
they can turn off your power. But that said, the way I see this city is we've created these fiefdoms, like the Department of Water Power, the police department, the building and code people, and there's no oversight.
Right.
And so these fiefdoms end up going off the rails, not because they mean to, because there's just no oversight. And that's what I think LA City Council's job is to do, is to say, hey, look, building code, and you can't have 17 construction sites on the same street in the same week. It's insane. Nobody can drive up and down the streets. The construction people laugh at you, and the builders are getting rich while the people who actually live in the neighborhood are getting screwed.
Yeah.
So we need to have rules, and we need to have real inspectors, and we need to have the right incentives. And I think LA will improve dramatically, especially when you're talking about traffic and quality of life. So the second area of green that I wanted to bring up is cannabis. The cannabis community in LA is massive, and in Southern California, and our roots in the cannabis world obviously go back to the 60s. And so when you think about a city like Venice, where its roots in cannabis really go back to Jim Morrison and really actually hanging out, smoking weed on the boardwalk in Venice, and you're talking about tourism and opportunities, we've had such a weird policy for cannabis here in LA City. We're the first state to really be legal. We have this amazing opportunity, but this licensing process is absurd.
Right.
And who gets licenses and when, how few have actually been granted. There's liquor stores everywhere killing people. And, there's half the pot stores are illegal. I think they closed a lot of them. And the legal ones are doing very well, and they're well-run businesses. Honestly, the operators of the cannabis companies are well-run businesses. But the ridiculousness of every step of running a cannabis business, it's crazy. And then I still think we need to deal with like cannabis lounges. Like there needs to be a place where people can go and hang out and listen to music and smoke pot. There's all kinds of wacky rules and regulations. Somebody's got to go through this and say, hey, this doesn't make sense. It's hurting commerce.
Yeah.
We've got empty retail everywhere. Everywhere. We need to encourage legal businesses to take these spaces. And cannabis lounges, cannabis dispensaries are legitimate businesses employing tons of people, and just even paying your taxes is a nightmare. So that's a federal issue. But I think the city really needs to go out and say, hey, if you're an entrepreneur and you want to start a cannabis business, we're going to take some of this red tape out of it.
Right.
Okay? Because it's crazy. Also for events.
And what that red tape is leading to is a lot of illegal shops, right? And those are the ones that are taking away the revenue, and it's less safe. And
Well, that's what happens. They just open the illegal shop.
Right.
Well, and I think a big part of the problem is, and I haven't delved into this very heavily in a while, so I probably should. But
You haven't dealt into cannabis, or you haven't dealt into
neither.
Yeah.
It's been a while for either. But I think part of the problem is probably this dual system of pre-ICO, cannabis and post-income control ordinance cannabis. So there seems to be, as far as I can tell, a heavy bias in terms of, whether or not you were permitted pre-ICO or after. And I don't know that that's the distinction we want to make. I think in general, when we're talking about bringing business, we want good businesses, whether they are new businesses or whether they have been around for 15 years.
But also for social equity. I think we need to reach out
to
entrepreneurs of different backgrounds.
Absolutely.
And say, hey, here's an opportunity for you. But I also think there should be some coaching involved. Because I think what happens with the social equity component is you see these young business people who want to get into cannabis who don't have business experience, and they're not succeeding. And I think there should be a program, like a mentorship program, something I'd be happy to help people with. Like, is this a really good business plan or not? Even though, you're trying to open a cannabis shop, but you need maybe some help. And I think the social equity component is really crucial to the success of cannabis, because it's been such a bad thing for so many young people who are sort of just caught up being kids. And so making it right is part of it. And part of it is just business. If I'm going to open a restaurant, if I'm going to open a bar, why can't I open a cannabis shop or a cannabis lounge or have an event?
In general, there's no reason why Los Angeles shouldn't be the #1 destination in the country or the world for opening a new business. What we need to do is we need to boldly do things like saying, look, if you open a business, you're not going to pay city taxes for at least 5 years. And we can look at whether it means you don't ever pay those taxes, or quite frankly, it's probably a better idea to say, we're going to defer them to revisit in 5 years. If you end up killing it, you come out, you make millions of dollars, and you can afford to pay that tax bill in 5 years, you should pay it. But we're going to help you get started. We're going to take away your permit fees. We're going to fast track you getting what you need to get your business open, because right now you have this problem where a lot of smart people, a lot of ambitious people, a lot of creative people are legitimately afraid of putting their home, their life, their family on risk out there if you don't succeed. So we need to make it as comfortable as possible for somebody to take a risk and to create jobs. 100%. And we're not doing that right now. Right now, 100%. Nobody is out there standing at a podium saying LA is open for business.
That's right.
Good business.
Miami's doing it.
Right.
And they're getting the business.
Like the crypto industry.
Yeah, that's right. We're going to get to that next. But like, this is a very good point. When I started GK 11 years ago, we're in the city of Santa Monica, which actually has higher taxes than the city of LA. And we're almost on the border. And there was this discussion, maybe we should move over a few blocks because we'll be in the city of LA. But we're a new business. We're not making money. And I get this bill from Santa Monica, and I'm trying to figure out how much I owe. And I was like, wait, it's not based off profits. And I was like, how is tax not based off profit?
Right.
I was like, oh, you mean it's based off revenue? So I had to pay taxes when I was losing money.
Gross receipts tax.
And so like the idea that the city just gets a cut, like right off the top, whether you make money or not, it's just not fair.
Right.
You know, I'm investing hundreds of thousands of dollars to start a business, employing people, taking space, buying stuff, and now I got to pay you. You guys should be encouraging me to do this because I could go to Miami, get tax benefit or whatever.
Right.
You know, if I start my business in Miami, just my personal income tax is dropping 13%. That's a loan incentive. So we definitely need these incentives. I think that's a great idea. Crypto. So we talked about making our city open for business. So I think it's Francis Suarez is his name, who's the mayor of Miami. And I've been following this guy on Twitter and watching what he's doing. Now, I like Miami, but I don't love Miami. Okay, Miami has more problems than LA times 10. Okay, and I'm not going to go into all the issues of Miami. And I like Miami. I'm not saying this from a position of hate. I actually really enjoy it. I like Miami. But when I'm there, I'm like, come on, this is not the best city to be starting a business other than for taxes. But he's created that impression that Miami wants to open for business, but also meeting with business owners, meeting with crypto people, meeting with cannabis people, meeting with clean energy people, meeting with business owners, and making the effort to say, we're open for business, come to LA, let's figure out how we can make this grow. Because what we've seen really in California is almost like, not an exodus, but a slow bleed of our wealth.
Yeah.
You know, so we lost Elon this year.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you what a huge loss this was. Well, we had these California politicians, you know, insulting him. And he was like, I'm just going to move. Okay. Now, part of the taxes he can't change because he still operates in California. But I'm thinking on a personal income tax level that now, fortunately, when he sold his stock last year, he still has to pay California taxes on the $16 billion of stock sale. Fortunately for California, it generated hundreds of millions of dollars in taxes for California. Okay. And now he's gone. What kind of, this is crazy, right? And I don't want to leave this city. I say it to my wife all the time. But every time I look at my tax bill, which is actually right now, because we're doing taxes right now, I go, I would make a fortune leaving LA.
Yeah.
And it sucks that I have to feel that way because there's so many good things about LA. I'm willing not to do that, but it shouldn't be that way. You shouldn't have to literally give away a ton of money to live in this city. So how do we deal with affordability? How do we deal with some of these issues? And I'll get to that in a second. But we got to be encouraging of new technologies like cryptocurrencies. And I think a lot of politicians have immediately turned and run when they hear the word cryptocurrency. And they don't understand. It's here to stay. It's a form of commerce. And we want to encourage businesses that are developing technologies to come to LA.
And more than that, developed in LA for the most part.
Right.
This is the home of crypto, and it's part of a much bigger fintech ecosystem. And we have these big institutions in Los Angeles, in the 5th district, like UCLA, that could be this incubator. And in terms of biotech too, with Cedars and entertainment, you know, we're all worried about the future.
Like a tech innovator, like fund or area.
Yeah. So Mayor Garcetti rolled out some things in that regard, and it hasn't really lived up to its potential. We can do a lot more. Film production, which is a traditional industry, right? We're all really worried about it. The port, which is falling apart, it's responsible for 1/9.
We got a lot of work to do.
Right, with you know, men and women working their butts off, but it's 1/9 of all the jobs. We got to do a better job there. Supply chain, and then entertainment and tourism, which is another massive part of this industry. So on every piece of our economy,
revitalize tourism a little bit because we're not getting the foreign tourism that we were getting. Because and I don't know if that's going to come back anytime soon. Like it'll come back, but it'll take years.
But it's also tied to the cleanliness and safety issues too, right?
Absolutely.
Our reputation is not what it used to be.
I mean, look, one of my
advertising in foreign markets too, that we have cleaned up the city.
Right.
Come visit.
We're here in Santa Monica, obviously, and one of the endorsements I'm most proud to have, because while it's its own city, it's essentially geographically part of CD11. But the Santa Monica Police Officers Association has endorsed our campaign, and one of the biggest reasons is I think, you know, I have that common sense understanding. I know Sam has it also, and he just brought up the point. He took the words out of my mouth, which is, one of the biggest ways to grow our tourism, to get people back here, is to make it clear to folks that this is a safe city. That we are dedicated to making it safer, that when we have things dumped, we pick them up. When there are encampments, we get people into shelter and treatment and we clear them. And, you know, the crypto issue is a great example of, you know, leaders that run from new ideas, it's almost a deficit in a leadership style. And I think you have to lead one of two ways, and I think you have to live one of two ways, right? You can either be motivated by a fear of failure, everything you do in life is to somehow avoid failing, or you can run towards success. You can take risks. You can run towards a better outcome. And looking at new technologies, whether they be financial, whether they be in terms of energy, whether they're in terms of building, we need leadership in this city that's going to move forward aggressively. I mean, the Los Angeles Chamber of Commerce has endorsed my campaign, I think, for that very reason. They're not nobody right now in Los Angeles is coming out and saying, let's be bold, let's go forward. And you know what? Let's take every bit of information we have. And if we make the decision to take the car right, and 6 months down the road, clearly we missed something or new information, then we'll turn the car around and go back left. We won't have such an ideology.
But I think that's a vision.
Yeah.
You see, I think what happens, and partially I think that's a byproduct of aging too, because I'm sort of crossing over myself into this range where we take comfort in what we know.
Yeah.
And when there's things that are new and somewhat radical and sort of threaten our basic belief system, it's easy to reject it.
Yeah.
So there's it's kind of like Elvis Presley, it was like rock and roll, back in the 50s. This Elvis is a nightmare. Well, he turned out to be one of the greatest artists of all time. Changed music. But at the time, parents hated him.
But there's in addition to the vision, there's two perspectives. One is if you're a career politician or a career staffer, you're not going to take risks because your sole purpose for existence is to get elected and reelected. And the 5th Council District has historically hired the same old folks, career politicians, their staffers and their family members. We've gotten terrible results. I know CD11 has had similar experiences. That's one. And number two is there's not a single member of this 15-member city council that oversees an $11 billion budget and is responsible for the life and safety of 4 million people that has a business perspective.
Exactly.
Right? Not one who's ever met payroll, I'm a business owner, not one is a business owner.
It's crazy.
No one has paid that.
Actually, the background of our city council is embarrassing.
Most of them are career staffers and politicians and family members, right?
One was actually the boyfriend of the
you cannot understand business if you have not owned and run
the gross receipts tax.
I say that about investing.
If you've never paid that gross receipt tax, you don't know the difference between a gross receipts tax, versus a based off of profits, right? Because you're not paying that tax, right?
Well, I just dealt with mine, probably as did you.
February 28th, right?
But I think that's one of the reasons I'm so stoked that you guys are running. Is it's like that's what we're lacking because so many people in your position don't want to do this.
Right. Like we both come from a really progressive place. We want to help people, of course, but we know we can't get there if we keep demonizing the people that are creating the housing and the jobs.
But I think
and
you
the
guys
tax
are very
base,
special.
Right?
Look,
exactly.
Once again, I think you guys are really special because you're wading into a very difficult battle. Politics in this city, you'll learn more soon. Once you get closer to winning, how things really work. You are a threat to the status quo. And there's winners and losers on this $11 billion budget. And if you start changing stuff, that means there's going to be losers. And there's going to be winners. And that's, I think, why it takes a brave person, somebody who's willing to go up against some pretty powerful forces that don't want to see their budgets cut to put money into green energy, for example. Okay. And at the same respect, there's a lot of bureaucracy you've got to get through. And it takes a tremendous amount of patience. I ran a charity, the Guardians, for 2 years, and I realized I was not qualified for this because as a business owner, I see solutions and want to implement them immediately. Right. And when you run a government or a charitable, it doesn't really work that way.
Right.
Okay. Not that you can't get stuff done. It just, you go about it very differently than if you run a business. So I admire the fact that you're willing to wade into this because in my mind, business is easier. Because we just implement solutions.
And it plays out too, right? When Uber came on the scene, cannabis, Airbnb, it took the city years to come up. Bird scooters took the city years to come up with some regulation, and we're not even enforcing the rules. What's coming up next? AI, right? That's a big thing, right?
Well, it's
the
like
future
the
of
self-driving
solar
stuff. Like they want to stop full self-driving, and I'm like, no, this is such important technology. People are getting run over every day. How many people die in LA every day in traffic accidents? And it's like, we need to encourage the technology of full self-driving, not discourage it because maybe somebody might get hurt, which actually hasn't happened. Meanwhile, I think I read there was like 2 teenagers died this weekend in a horrible accident. And I'm just reading this stuff going, this was a preventable accident.
The streets of Los Angeles, setting aside the crime, are a dangerous place right now.
For sure.
Streetcar racing, for pedestrians, for cyclists.
Sure. And it seems like the CHP is kind of gone. Like I haven't seen the police really enforcing traffic like they used to. And I'm not sure why. I think unfortunately, a lot of police are not that motivated right now. I think we need to deal with that issue with, police shouldn't be perceived as a negative. Right. I get the problems with the police department, but when you have a problem, those are the people you call.
Right.
And we need to create a better environment around policing, which is they have to behave a certain way. Yeah. And we have to create a better citizens' acceptance and trust of the police. But quite frankly, right now, I have zero trust in the police.
Well, it's not a binary choice, right? So a lot of activists have said, look, we either reform the police department, right? Or you over militarize, right? No, we can do both. We have to make everyone and the police department itself and its union, they want to do the job the right way and have the right people with these responsibilities. And that's the only way how we make our neighborhoods safer. And just on the point of police officers and what are they doing? They're overwhelmed with homelessness. 140,000 phone calls every year go to LAPD, and a lot of them are not violent, non-criminal. So
they're like hundreds of calls a day, basically.
Literally. Oh, yeah.
So it's sort of this like negative reinforcing cycle we get with homelessness, calls to the police, calls to the paramedics, cost to society. And it's just this cycle of pain, basically.
Yeah. No, I hear about it on an almost daily basis. I mean, my brother's an LA County deputy sheriff, sheriff's deputy, and it's exactly the way he describes the situation. Is it's become, you're spread too thin. You're dealing with stuff you shouldn't be dealing with, and on top of it, for risking your life out there and trying to do a good job, you're getting vilified in a lot of corners of society, and that's not only bad for morale within the department, but it makes it very hard to recruit new police officers.
It's the same thing. It's a few bad apples ruin the bunch. And it's like with policing, that's what happens. And so you have thousands of police officers on a force, and 3 guys are bad and do horrible things and all over the news. And it's like everybody is painted this brush. Yeah. And it does make it hard. And then I think it makes it harder to attract the right people for the job too, but they do serve our society in a very important role. And so it's like, how do we make this mutually beneficial? I don't want to see people getting killed and shot unnecessarily. Correct. And at the same respect, I want a safe society, and I want police to be respected, because that's how you get a safe society. So it's like, how do we balance it? And I do think a lot of that starts with training too.
Recruiting, training, accountability, oversight, reducing the responsibilities. The goal being reducing the number of times a police officer has to unholster a gun.
Right, exactly. Right. Well, and like every crime doesn't need to be stopped. It's like they'll end up unholstering a gun and possibly shooting somebody over a crime that's quite minor because the person ran.
Or not every call to LAPD needs to be responded to by someone with a gun.
Right. Well, that's the mental health unit, which we need, which it's like clearly like domestic disturbances are super tough, and it's like
City Department of Health, my friend.
Yeah. And they should be going out without guns, with like padded stuff and be like, all right, guys, separate, but I think these are great solutions. And I think the last thing I'd like to just mention, one of the most important things that I think hopefully you guys can do in your, not just campaign, but when you win in running our city, is dealing with corruption and the perception of our politicians due to corruption, number one. And number two, like in the Garcetti situation where behavior was poor and overlooked, whether it's sexual harassment or this or that, there seems to be 2 standards in our city where politicians, city council people kind of do and act in ways that aren't appropriate, and they sort of get away with it, whether it's corruption. I don't want to say get away with it, because a lot of them just recently got busted, for example. But it's a horrible thing to see this happening over and over again, with the developers bribing the council members so they can build the building, and the city inspectors getting bribed, and this and that, and they're building houses that the most expensive house in LA doesn't even have approvals. Right. This one house. How do these things get built? Right. Like, how do these hotels get built as houses that aren't even approved by anybody? It's still not actually have a certificate of occupancy, and it's a $130 million house. Yeah. It probably shouldn't have been built, and it probably cut corners. So I think one of the things I hope you guys can do, not only just by who you are, but by making it an effort to not be okay with that corruption.
Yeah. Right.
And it's kind of like you like cross the line. Well, I'm a politician. I don't want to be too hard on my fellow politicians. Well, I'm sorry. They're bringing everybody down. Yeah. And to see the scandal after scandal after scandal, it just, what happens is people don't want to vote. They don't care, and they don't really respect the effort and sort of what it takes to make our community better. And that's one of the reasons I support you guys so much. And thank you so much for coming out today and doing this, because my goal is just to educate people that we have great choices like you guys, Mike and Sam, great choices for voters here in the West Side. Great ideas, great energy. And we're going to make a huge difference in our city. It's exactly what the cities need. So I really want to thank you all for, once again, coming on the show, doing what you're doing. Yeah. Obviously we can do this again as we get, further in the campaign. When's the election? It's June?
June 7th.
Yep. June 7th.
Ballots get mailed. Citywide. Ballots get mailed May 9th. So
the ballots are mailed, so everybody can vote by mail for this election.
If you register to vote, you'll get a ballot.
Okay, great. Yeah. And then, so I don't think it's every district in LA is up for vote.
It's the odd districts.
It's the odd districts. Okay, so it's half of them, let's say. Right. So yeah, I don't know if you guys have some of the other candidates who are running, because I was reading some people who are running against what's his name from downtown, Curran Price. Yeah. And this guy's been there forever too. And boy, I'd like to see somebody really run against him. But there's some great other young people too running for city council as well. So once again, I appreciate what you're doing for our city, having the love for our city and the wherewithal to deal with running for office. And June 7th, we want to get everybody out to vote. We're going to bring a lot of awareness, I hope, over the next couple months to people, so we can get them. They don't have to go to vote. You have to open up your piece of paper and fill it out. Right. So hopefully we'll get thousands of people to do this through getting involved, getting energized. If you're a big believer in the future of LA, clean energy, these are the guys.
Yeah, I think we both agree that government in the right hands can make a big difference, be a force for good. But we can't do it alone. We need our friends in the private sector, the nonprofit leaders. Right. That's why this platform is so critical for both of us. You can follow me at my website, sameforla.com, and on social media.
Yep. I'm Newhouse4la.com. Great.
Yeah. And so you can go to their websites to learn more about what they're doing and what they believe in. And most importantly, get involved. You can also make donations to the campaign on their websites. Every donation helps a lot in local elections. So don't think you can't make a difference. You absolutely can on a local level. And I think that's one of the biggest fallacies. And I think a lot of young people don't really fully get the power of the democracy we're in. Yeah. And when you actually do it and you actually get involved, it's super empowering, and that's kind of what my goal is with the show, is really to show young people you can get involved, you can make a difference, and see the actual results in our city today. So not just here in LA, all over the country, I'm encouraging young people to run for office, to support young people running for office, to push a clean and green future for this country. So thank you, Sam. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Ross. This was fun.
Have a great afternoon.
You too.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.